Hello everyone, welcome into our latest live broadcast. Today it is Sunday, the 25th of May, 2025. It's Memorial Day weekend here in the United States. Hope everybody here is having a good, happy, relaxing weekend, maybe a little barbecue, and of course the thanks to all of our veterans out there as always. So tomorrow is a national holiday, but we're still live tomorrow for our members only as always. And today what I've got in store for you is I'm going to break down the old streamer. We put this streamer together. I'm trying to remember the story on this. We put the streamer together in 2019 back at Studio A with a Intel i7 9700K. It had, like a Seasonic power supply. It had all different parts in it. Different RAM, different power supply, different video card. I think we had a 1070 in there. And a lot of things got switched around and moved. So we have the Kraken NZXT cooler that was added. We swapped out to a 9900KS processor. We went to the Intel Arc graphics card. We changed the RAM out to the G.Skill Trident Z. And, look, it's a fast computer by any stretch of the imagination today. But thanks to our members, all of which you see here in our chat joining us and saying hello, we've been able to buy some new parts for it, which also helps us to create new content. Also, I've made, it's been no secret that the reason that this was put together was strictly to attract viewers who would see the RGB on it. I am not a fan of RGB. And one of the reasons I'm not a fan of RGB is, after we added so much RGB to this, we could no longer close the back panel. The cable management on this case is insane, absolutely insane. And because this side panel closes magnetically, there's no way to latch it down. So it just was a side of, you never saw that side on camera. You only saw this side, which looks great from this side. But it's not a proper build, and it's definitely nothing I would ordinarily build. So I thought, this will be a great time now that it's 6 years old. Take it apart. Let's pull all that nonsense RGB. I don't mind a little bit, if the RAM has RGB or the NZXT cooler's pretty nice. That's fine. But the power cable that lights up going into the motherboard is ridiculous. It adds a lot of cabling for that. I found I don't need the video card at all. As the internal graphics cards built onto the CPUs have been getting better, specifically from Intel, for content creators such as myself, I actually find I get better performance when I render videos out of PowerDirector with an integrated graphics chip from Intel, a modern one, than with NVIDIA, it's 3 times longer. If a video takes me 30 minutes to render on the integrated video, it takes 90 minutes to render on the NVIDIA RTX, whatever I had in there. That's why it got pulled. And I went with the Intel Arc series because they support AV1 encoding. Unfortunately, PowerDirector does not. So I'm right back to square one again. So I no longer need that graphics card. So what we're going to do today, here's the plan. We're going to take everything out of here except what I plan on reusing. What's good enough 6 years later for us to keep using. And what I suspect is our NZXT power supply, which is a 750C. We'll keep that. We'll keep the Kraken cooler because all the Intel Ultra CPUs, no matter what we go with right now, they're only K processors. They're going to need a cooler. I don't have a problem with this cooler. It's fine. Even though it's a liquid cooler, it's definitely not as old as the rest of the system. It's not 6 years old, but it's probably 3 or 4 years old. It's still got another 3 or 4 years in it, I'm sure. If not, we'll deal with it. But there's nothing wrong with it. So we'll keep using that. The motherboard, the RAM, the CPU, the video card all gets yanked. And this thing's pretty dusty. We'll get a nice little dusting out, a little cleaning. We'll inspect our fans. I think these are all Noctua, real quiet fans, so those can stay. I think there's one in the front, one in the back. And it should be a very lethargic process for me, because when this is built properly with the Phanteks Enthoo case, it's a beautiful looking case. But if you try and cram 10 pounds of crap into a 5-pound bag, it just doesn't look good. Or it only looks good from one side. Don't look at the other side. In my opinion, this is a case that is too small for what was placed into it. However, in my defense, things were added and added and added. Now it's going to make the disassembly process that much more complex for putting in parts we didn't need, that we spent money we didn't need to spend, that created problems we didn't need to have. So that's why I'm so against this whole RGB thing. If you've got all day and nothing else to do, man, you can do whatever you want. But for me to try and get work done, and I'm dealing with multiple, dozens and dozens of computers every month, I can't just be held up by one. So this wasn't all done at once. It was a little bit here and a little bit there, but I absolutely, totally regret doing this. The fact of the matter is, if we had stripped all the RGB out of this, it would look fantastic just with the RGB RAM and the liquid cooler. And the reason for the liquid cooler is that 9900K CPU. Now, we do have some air coolers that could cool that are not noxious, that are actually affordable now. But I was also looking for a showpiece on camera. At the end of the day, if I wanted to put all this RGB in there, if I had known that ahead of time, I would have needed a much bigger case. So, part of the reason they don't give us much room here for cable management back here, because it was just never designed for that kind of equipment. And some of that stuff didn't even exist when this case was built, so it wasn't designed for it. So, this just continues to vindicate and verify and give you real-world examples about why this is a waste of money to buy this stuff, the downsides of it, including the complexity of the cable management in the back. I mean, it's just over the top. I mean, take a good look in there. This is ridiculous. To get any work done in here, we're going to have to just dig through cables after cables. Everything is tied up together because there's nowhere else to run them. There are better case designs for this. There's even a little window here, which was designed to show you like an SSD mounted in the back, but all you're going to see are cables. Well, I don't understand the window back there anyway, but this case was meant to be the showpiece. You understand what I'm saying? If you've got a nice showpiece case, then you don't need to gussy up the inside of it. Because the minute you start drawing attention to the inside, nobody sees the beauty of the outside. And that's what I encountered a lot of from viewers was, wow, what's that cooler? How'd you get those lights? Nobody was paying it. No one said, hey, what's that case? No one paid attention. Well, very few people paid attention. And I think it's a beautiful case. Even to this day, I think it's elegant and timeless. So if we just don't try and cram too much stuff in it, we try and keep it basic, we don't have to swing to the exact opposite with no RGB, but just keep it mild, a little bit. Less is more. So let's put it that way. All right, let me say hello to our members joining us in the chat on this wonderful Sunday. Dimitri just became a supporter. Welcome to being a member of our tech club, Dimitri. Glad to have you here. Thank you for supporting us. Luke Greenia says hello from Vermont, as well as Dustin Fuller and Mark Gaines. Mark is joining us from Northern Ireland. Frank Jimmy says hello, Uncle Carey and Aunt Mara and everyone in the chat. Got some wicked thunderstorms rolling through here in Florida, but we'll be sitting at 86 degrees Fahrenheit. Oh my gosh, that's hot and muggy. Mark Gaines with a 10-pound super chat says hello, Carey, Mara, and everyone in the chat. Cheers, Mark. Good to see you, my friend. We right now in the video description, we have some blank spots because there's some confusion due to the upgrade. Oh, you filled it all in?
All the links are...
Okay, so before the show, we had the prior build, which was a 9700K, a Seasonic power supply, I think Corsair RAM. So all that's been changed since then, so we were using the wrong source. Anyway, we'll find out if there's any more surprises as we take it apart. Let's see what else. Ben Laird joining us from Scotland says hello. A little bit of a late start today. Some folks were wondering what happened to us. Man, you guys don't let 3 minutes slip, do you? That's all right. I appreciate your anticipation and your eagerness. I love it. Keep me on time. David Graham says hello. Bill Stodd joins us and says hello. There's Richard DeFries. Says he just got home from a trip to Sardinia. Great trip. Dan Nilsson joins us. Welcome in, guys. Good to see everyone there today. We've got our chat room now. If you want a live interaction with me and each other during these live shows, well, there wouldn't be live shows if it wasn't for the members who support us. We are a sponsor-free, and always have been, a sponsor-free channel. If you like watching commercials, well, you have plenty to choose from here on YouTube. They call it content, but they're mostly just lengthy commercials. Or YouTube Shorts, which are really just also commercials for the most part. So if you enjoy sponsor-free content, then please become our sponsor. Join us here and support us with our membership. And in return for that, you get videos every Monday. You get access to our video archive. The free videos go back 12 months. Anything that goes back to 2008, 2009, those videos, to see that archive, would require membership. The people who don't like that are usually the people who want to take everything and give nothing. So you're not going to get any sympathy from me if somebody says, oh man, your channel I really liked watching those old videos, and now you've put them behind a paywall. No, what I've done is I've kept them from being collapsed onto the YouTube channel and having the YouTube channel disappear. That's what I did. The fact that they're still there and the fact that the archive remains available today is because of the great support we have from a very tiny amount of our viewers that have decided to become members and support us here. And I want to make that very clear and give everybody in the chat room credit. Plus, not all the members are in the chat, obviously. We also have members who watch and don't participate. And their support combined is what keeps us going here on the channel. And hey, Mara, could you just put that right on the chair right there? Yeah. Thank you. We just got some parts for what's going to be the new parts for this build. I didn't expect them to come in today. So in any event, I want the viewers who have never supported us to be aware that this channel would have been shut down if not for the viewers who do support us. And so the fact that the content, we can still continue to make new content and we can still offer that content for free is a gift from the members. And we can do bigger content, we can do more extravagant content when we have the budget, or if we have the budget. And should the memberships all dry up and go away, well, I think the future of the channel then will be in their hands, just as it is in yours. It's a little frustrating for me sometimes to hear somebody tell me how great my videos were and how upset they are that they're behind a paywall when they've never given me anything. So what I'm hearing is your videos had great value to me, but I won't give you a penny and I demand you put them back, or I'm going to unsubscribe to you. And unfortunately, you know, I'm stuck. I am in a position where if the channel shuts down, everybody gets unsubscribed. And while I appreciate the viewership, I'm not making any money from the viewership. Just to be clear, it's so little money, it's not even, you can't live off of that. So it's not a punishment. We're just trying to keep things moving, and we're trying to avoid making commercials, which is more or less the vast majority of YouTube channels is how they finance their channels when they're producing as much content such as us. And again, if you are claiming the videos have value, then please show us. If you're saying the videos don't have value, well, then that explains why there was never any support from those individuals. But to say they have value and then to never, you know, give anything back from everything they've taken, it's pretty bizarre to me that they think they're doing me a favor by watching my videos. I feel like I'm doing them a favor by investing all the time and money into content they're not entitled to, that I don't owe, and they've never met me, I don't owe them anything, and they don't seem to appreciate it. So They seem to think their view is payment enough. Unfortunately, that's a big rampant thing. That's YouTube's fault. And that's the reality that we deal with today. All right. So for that reason, we have locked down our chat room so that our people, the people who support us, the people who truly show what this content means to them, can interact with me and each other without dealing with spammers, bots, or some of the trouble that comes in from free viewers. Most free viewers are fine, they don't cause any trouble. But unfortunately, in that category, that's where the problem exists. So that was why that decision was made, and it will likely stay this way, just so you know. The videos are still free to watch, regardless. It's just the interaction that we're trying to minimize in order to minimize distraction, improve the quality of the content, and make sure that memberships are getting every penny's worth. Because unlike most viewers, they are the underwriters of these videos. And without them, and I cannot stress this enough, videos wouldn't exist. All right, so we'd love to have you as part of it, just so you know why. I'm not getting rich off of it by far, but the types of projects I can do are limited to our budgets. And our budgets are dictated by our members, not by our free viewers. It's not difficult math. All right, with that, Charles Griffin with a $3 super chat. Thank you, Charles. Ben Laird with a £2 super chat. I also want to shout out our good friend Doug Betts, who sent a very generous Amazon gift card to us the other day. And Doug Betts has a channel, Live Windows Training with Doug Betts. And if you want to check out his channel, I certainly encourage you to do that. He's live 6 days a week in the mornings before we get started. And he does a lot of interaction like I do. As a peer technician in the industry for over 30 years like me, if you like this kind of content, I think you'll enjoy his content as well. So check out his channel. And let's see if I missed anybody else. Oh, Barry Klein joins us and says hello. And all right, well, let's get on with it. Basically, I am going to strip this whole thing down. What's the other thing that's frustrating when you have so much junk in here? And by junk, I mean, it's just flash. It doesn't really do anything other than make your life unnecessarily complicated. I am a king of practical and simple. You give me simple, I'm a happy guy. I don't want a bunch of mixed up flavors when I order food. I want things separate so I can enjoy the flavor of each thing. That's just the way I'm built. I like to compartmentalize everything and organize it. And when you start adding all of this stuff inside of the computer, things get messy and it's hard to really see anything because you're just seeing everything, and it's hard to isolate one or two things or even details because there's just too much. It's overwhelming. That also means the cabling is overwhelming, the complexity is overwhelming, the amount of software you've got to download and update from Leon Lee for the Strimer cable, from NZXT for the liquid cooler, from G.Skill to control the RAM, from the motherboard to control the RGB, from the Intel Arc processor to control its RGB. It ends up with a box chock full, right to the top, of all kinds of extra cables and things, accessories that came with all that unnecessary stuff we did not have to buy. I would even go so far as to say we could have built 2 of these for the cost of this one. If we would have taken out everything that wasn't needed, we would have had enough money left over to build another one. So it's up to you. Would you rather have one computer that's all flashy, or would you rather have 2 really good, well-built, performance, quiet, high-end computers that'll last you 10 years or more? It's your choice. I know which way I would pick. I think you know which way I would pick too. So let me get these panels off of here. These should just lift. If I remember, these lift off. We'll get them out of the way. It's getting there. Now, you will see screws back here onto the hinges, but don't remove the hinges. These will just lift straight up, and you shouldn't have to really struggle with it like I did. I think they're a little bit stiff. I'll just set that right over there. And these really do get in the way. They look great and everything, but I suppose if you just need to get in for something quick, they're handy, but to work on it, it really helps to get these off until you get the machine built. And this will be one of the final things we'll put back on. I mean, no differently than most cases, we take the side panels off. And just because these are on hinges doesn't mean that that process is going to change anything for us. I'd have been just as happy, honestly. In fact, probably happier if these screwed down, because I probably could have shoved the cables in tight and then tightened the screws like closing a suitcase that was overfilled, instead of just being unable to close this because of all of the cables in the back. The other thing that happens with RGB is it gets more efficient. So we have a version 1 Leon Lee Strimer cable in here. That's that motherboard power connector that lights up. And it has a PCIe slot, but we ran out of PCIe slots, so we had nowhere to put that. So it's just hanging back here as well, and that's how you controlled that RGB. Now it's all done through software instead of through physical switches. And so the version 2 of that is very different, but you're still looking at $100, $150, maybe even $200 to get the motherboard Strimer cable and the video card Strimer cable from Leon Lee. They're like 80 bucks a piece. That's a lot just to add a power supply extension that also needs to have power to light up, plus adding to your cabling, plus adding to your budget. And it does nothing. Nothing. Just pretty colors. So I am struggling to get this one off of here, aren't I? Come on now. Sometimes just wiggling it and lifting it. Something seems to be a little bit tight. Push it down. Let's bring it back up after I push it down. See, it'll go up and down pretty good to a certain point, and then it just kind of starts to get stuck. Making progress. I'm surprised it's that tight. Probably because it hasn't been opened in a long time. Well, it hasn't been removed, I should say, in a long time. And I want to be careful. You don't want to use too much force and end up pulling that up and breaking it. So it's tempered glass. It's difficult to break, but when it breaks, it shatters and it goes everywhere. So I'm lifting up. With this hand, I'm pushing up. And with this hand, I'm wiggling it left and right in the hopes that it'll coerce it into coming off gently. Yeah, so that kind of got my thumb a little bit, but better my thumb than the glass. I'm okay with that. Okay. Set that right there. So this gives you a better idea of what we're really looking at here. In fact, we can even take the lid off. And our radiator for our liquid coolers under here. This comes back like that. There's our lid. Set that over here with everything else. Okay. Now, when I tell you this case is jammed up, I mean, seriously, you couldn't put any more in here. There is a spare slot cover back here. That's where the 4-port capture card went that we took out to put into the modern streamer. Those capture cards are, well, at the time they were $900 a piece plus sales tax. Today, like an Elgato 4K Pro is like $250 plus sales tax. So I could buy 2.5 of the modern day capture cards, but there's very difficult to find. Not many people need a 4-port 4K capture card. And then they sell them professionally for upwards of $1,800 and more for professional production houses, which, you know, clearly we don't have the budget for that. The case is the Phanteks Enthoo, and I really do like the case. But we did jam a lot of stuff in here. I mean, essentially, we've got, if you remember the Xenos build, very similar in the confining space. You've got in this type of micro ATX build, almost identical. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as you're not trying to put in a full tower series of components into a mid-tower case for this reason, this overcrowding reason. What do I want to take out first? Let's see. I mean, this is a big old mess. So I think what I'm going to do is get my wire cutters out and start getting through some of these nylon zip ties and kind of get a better idea what we're working with here. Not to mention all the time I spent on cable managing this. I mean, this is just a complete waste of my time in the sense that the amount of effort that would go through running a cable, tying it up, and then realizing that doesn't work, cutting the tie. Each one of these cables probably had to be cable managed 3 or 4 times the way that I do it, because as I start adding more cables, I realize one cable should have run underneath a different one, and so I end up having to cut the zip tie off and do it again. So you're looking at probably a 90-minute job and probably around 60 or 70 cable ties to get it to this. And that's me trying over and over to get this as flat as I could get it, and it's just too much. This is the Leon Lee Strimer control panel, and again, we can just cut all these cable ties off. And every time you cut these off, I don't know, you guys can count how many I'm taking off here. You risk every time you do that cutting into the cable. And if you cut into the cable like from your front panel header, I hope you have an extra front panel header, because that would be a very difficult thing to fix with soldering. This power cable, this is what is coming off of our NZXT power supply. It looks like I didn't have anywhere to tie it, so I went through these holes. I was being clever, because again, I can't emphasize this enough, it was never supposed to have this stuff in there. The engineers did not account for running a power cable, motherboard power cable, to the opposite side of where they would expect it needs to go. But I had to do that because I had to do something with it, because I added that Leon Lee Strimer, which in and of itself is a power supply, a power motherboard power cable extender. Even though I didn't need the extender, that's how you get the lights. So the extender starts here, and you plug your power supply power, motherboard power, into this. And it's a short extension unit that then goes into the front and plugs onto the motherboard. And then this also needs to have power plugged into it so the LEDs could light up. You'd think you could just pull power from one of these wires on the power supply. That's not how they do it. I'm not sure why. This here, and this is the other thing. Now I've got to keep everything straight if I ever want to reuse any of this. So that is part of that Strimer cable. And then this powers that, and that powers this. It's just a ton of cables, in case you don't believe me. You're about to see. In reality, just what a pain in the butt this is. So that cable I just unplugged, that's the power cable that lights up the extension cable. And as you can see, we've run it. What did I do here? It's run through these Velcro ties, which did make that job a little bit easier. But you've got all that to deal with, right? Because that's going to plug into this. And by the way, this needs power too. Yeah. What else? Come around here and unplug this side of that power cable extension. You guys remember what this looked like, right? I suppose I could plug it in and show you, but it's just it's a big carnival show. This was added later. Like I said, I didn't do all of this at once. But this would plug in here. And all this serves, the only purpose all of this hardware and wiring serves is to light that up. That's it. And it will also light up a matching the PCIe power to your graphics card if you buy the other $80 cabling kit for it. More zip ties. What is this to? Don't know. These are all fans right here. I can tell by looking. I'm going to say that we have our NZXT cooler. There's 2 fans up above. We have a fan in the back and a fan in the front, right? So it's going to be 4. So I don't necessarily want to undo those cables because we'll just be routing them again. What is this? This is probably powering our NZXT cooler as well. This, what is this? This is USB cable. This is probably controlling the liquid cooler. Your liquid cooler is going to have a ton of cables, right? You got the hoses for the fluid to go to the radiator, the 2 fans on the radiator. Each fan needs power. The pump, if it's got a screen like this one does, it costs extra. It's about $270 if I recall. Then you've got the software you have to load. You've got power to the screen. You've got USB to the screen so you can control it. It's just a lot of cables, and so if you have a big enough case, it's not that big of a deal as far as finding room, but it is still kind of a big deal to try and manage it all. I do intend to reuse this NZXT power supply, the C750, which you can kind of see down there. I think we can take the front off of this. Doesn't that just come off? There we go. You know, it's not too dusty. It's not too terrible. Okay. I can take the video card out. I will not be reusing the video card. That's, you know, additional power cables, and it appears to have, what is this? A USB coming off of the video card so you can control, guess what? The lighting. Okay. My thought is, you know, the 9900 KS processor we have in here is very, very good. And I'd like to be able to sell it. I know somebody that refurbishes computers and sells them on like Facebook and such. And I want to be able to sell that while it still has some value. You know, it's not going to have value for much longer. A 9900 KS, give it 3 or 4 years and it's pretty much going to be on the end of its life. There's our Intel Arc GPU. Pretty dusty. This is the A750. I forgot which model I put in there. Grab a microfiber cloth and just kind of wipe the dust off of there. And then of course it's got a USB cable because RGB. When you see everything disassembled and laid out on this table, and you look at the size of this case, you're going to wonder what sort of magic wand I have that made all that fit. It's ridiculous. It did look good from one side, though. Now, because I'm not using a graphics card in the upcoming build, I want to take... I've got a little dust cover plug in the HDMI port, and that's to prevent somebody from plugging in the video HDMI cable into the motherboard instead of into the video card. But since that does have built-in video on the CPU, and since I have no intention of pairing that motherboard with that graphics card again, I can take that little dust cover plug out. I mean, I really put that in there for me because I'm in a hurry a lot of times and I'm working with so many different computers. I need a quick way to, you know, I just plug the cables in. And if I have 2 HDMI plugs, I may not notice you know, because most of the systems I work on do not have separate discrete GPUs. So my default is always to plug into the board. That's just what I deal with mostly. So I do that for me as much as anybody else. I'm missing a screwdriver. Where did it go? I might have put it in the wrong drawer. No, it's not. Oh, yeah, that's exactly what I did. I put it in the wrong drawer. So I just want to pop that little dust cover out of there. And I do reuse these because I have a little Ziploc bag with HDMI port dust covers, display port dust covers, even DVI video out dust covers. If I don't want customers to use them, I do this for my customers. I also have the little plugs when they have systems that had 100 megabit networking and we upgraded them to 1 gig networking. It's just a matter of time before somebody unplugs the machine. Typically, they move it from one office to another. Then I get the support call about why isn't it working, because I've disabled the 100 megabit port in the operating system, and now they can't get online anymore. So what I'll do is I'll put these little plugs into ports I don't want customers to use when they have numerous ports of the same type, and that way they won't make any mistakes because they can only plug into one. And the plugs are very inexpensive, and if it saves me one support call, it more than paid for the entire bag of 50 plugs. I don't use them very often, but sometimes I've got an office where we upgraded to 2.5 gig networking, and I wanted to put the plugs into the 1 gigabit network port. Guess why? So they're a great thing to have on hand. Again, I don't use them that often, but kind of comes and goes, like when everybody was upgrading from, say, 100 megabit networking to gigabit, and now they're starting to do 2.5, some even 10. Not many though. Not many of my customers are going to 10. 10 gig networking is very fast and probably doesn't offer many people advantages other than, you know, making file transfers go faster, or if you have a lot of people in an office, then everybody gets their own 1 gig connection. Let's say 10 people can each get a 1 gig connection when you have 10 gigs available without any degradation affecting anybody else. So it's nice when you need it, but if it's just you by yourself, you're probably wasting your money. I don't know why I'm struggling so much to get this HDMI cover out. It should just pop out of there. I think it's getting hung up on the I/O shield. There it goes. I gouged that one all up. When I put them in, I like them nice and new. They're very inexpensive. It's just a cheap piece of plastic. They call it a dust cover. I don't know how you're going to get dust in there, but yeah, whatever. Okay, so we have our lines to our water block here. We've got our front port USB. We have USB to the water block. We have our power switch, reset switch. We've got a fan cable. We have our front port audio cable. Right there, that's all going to stay, of course, with the case. And we have a fan back here that's wired. Wow, what a mess this is. It's a very tight fit. Right back there, we've got that one disconnected. And yeah, this wire tie, the cable tie stuff would have been a lot worse if not for the Velcro ties that Phanteks gave us. Okay, these are our front ports here. I see. I see. So these right back here, that's all of our front ports. In fact, I'm going to cut these zip ties because I don't like the way I did that. So what ended up happening is I was not able to get the power switch on this computer. And what I ended up doing was taking a spare power switch, hooking it onto the board and running it out the back. And before every live stream, I had to turn the machine on by hitting a a switch on a cable hanging out of the back of here because I could not get the power switch back on. I would have had to have disassembled quite a bit to get to it, and I just decided this was an easier way to take care of it without all of that hassle, because again, just too much stuff. So there were sacrifices that had to be made in order to get that, and it was more than just sacrifices that I've mentioned regarding complexity and cost, but sacrifices in even, you know, having a machine built properly, in the sense that, you know, having a power switch hanging out off its wire in the back to turn the machine on and off was very home lab enthusiast and not very professional. And as you can see, when we don't use it anymore, I have no desire to keep it. It was strictly built because of the interest in the audience requesting such nonsense. And so that's why I did it. And now that I don't need it anymore, what the heck is this? We have an LED right there, which I've never noticed before. That must plug into the front panel. Well, oh, I guess that lights up this part right here. Interesting. So this little piece is like a tunnel. And when the light is in here and lights up, it sort of forces the light to go this way into the tunnel, so the light doesn't bleed out. And that gives us a little blue bar right here. All right, let's see. Let me take a quick look in the chat. Phil Stodd, Luke Greeny are talking to each other. I was told Xfinity doesn't allow with their router. Yeah, if the router's in your house, you don't have to worry about what it... There's no Xfinity police, so you don't have to worry about that. I would do the same thing if I had a cable modem with a built-in wireless. I would absolutely log into that and turn that wireless radio off. If you don't do that, you're just creating a lot of excessive and unnecessary congestion in your Wi-Fi channels that can create interference and slow your network down because you're worried about Xfinity's rules. When Xfinity pays the bill, they can make the rules. I don't even think about it. Just treat it like it's yours. Just don't physically open it up, but feel free to go in there and modify it. There's nothing Infinity. If that is a policy, it's unenforceable. And since you don't work for them, they can't fire you. Okay, so have no fear about that. Don't let those kind of things concern you. This is what corporate America does to try and control their customers, and there's no way for them to enforce it, and there's no punishment for you. And all it's doing is making your life miserable by overcrowding your wireless channels. Why would you sacrifice for them? You're already paying them. That's sacrifice enough, in my opinion. Find Me in Hawaii says, aloha, Carey, Mara, and everyone in the chat. Have a safe holiday. Enjoy your weekend. That's from Ken. Thank you, Ken. Ken also renews his membership, now a member for 36 months. Right on. And a $9.99 super chat on top of all that. Well, thank you very much, Ken. Nicholas Menard with a $20 Canadian super chat says, hey, Carey, I like that you seem to be very down to earth and no nonsense kind of guy, though I don't always agree with everything you say. and do, I can nonetheless appreciate a different perspective and opinion on things. Well, thank you, Nicholas, and that's the idea. I'm not trying to win you over by telling you what you want to hear. I am not a minister and you are not my choir. I'm running a business. I've been running a business for 34 years. If you can run your business while playing fun and games and doing nonsense and keep it in business and keep your customers happy, all we're playing around and worrying about what other people think that aren't your customers, well, you've got some kind of talent I've never seen anybody on this planet have before. What I'm trying to do is, starting out as a home user, I had a lot of wrong ideas about the industry. And when I started in the industry, I thought a lot of what the industry did was stupid and bureaucratic and made no sense. It was just inefficient and expensive. But the longer I stayed in the industry and the more I saw the kinds of things they deal with, the more it made sense to me. And then it occurred to me, this is how we should be running our homes, not the other way around. We shouldn't be running our businesses the way we run our homes. Now, you can talk, in that vein, you can talk to Doug Betts and you can talk to other technicians, and they have their way of running their business, right? And, for example, Costco has their way of running their business, and Walmart and Sam's Club have their way of running their business. And you're not going to go in there and tell Walmart how to run their business. You can shop there or not shop there. But I, as a business owner, would love to hear the inner workings of how those decisions are being made for a company that got that big. What are they doing differently than the smaller competitors? And I would eat that up. I wouldn't disagree or say I don't agree with them. I may not necessarily employ the same tactics because of our values, but I absolutely respect their success, which is undeniable. And if somebody has a computer repair business that is more successful than mine and wants to give me some tips, I'm glad to hear it. If somebody is a viewer sitting at home with no IT professional experience where they're paid and they want to tell me they don't agree with me, I don't know what difference that makes in the world, because I'm definitely interested and eager on how I can work smarter and grow a larger business and make more money. And since I've been doing it, I'm doing the best I can, but nobody's sitting on a couch watching. And I'm not saying you're one or the other. I don't know your background, but my default is it doesn't really matter to me if people agree or disagree unless they're investors in my company. When they've invested something more than their opinion, when they put their money where their mouth is, and they have as much to risk as I do financially, then we have a different conversation. But in the meantime, my goal is simply to turn on the camera and to introduce the concepts of running the business in a way that I wish was available to me when I first started, because boy, did I go in green. I was so brainwashed with home user mentality that it took me a good solid year to 2 years to really absorb how backwards and irresponsible it was to take computers so flippantly and irrelevantly when there are, in a business, so, people's lives are at stake in a hospital. And it's no different than working on a car, right? I mean, I can show you as a mechanic how to work on an ambulance, which is absolutely critical that things got to run or people could die. Or I can show you as a car enthusiast how I do unnecessary cold air intakes and, coil packs that are basically a complete waste of money, so I can get 6 more horsepower out of my 718 horsepower engine, which nobody would ever notice outside of a dyno. And it's up to you who you want to take the advice from, or if you want to take any of it at all. So anyway, I do appreciate your thoughts, and you're welcome to disagree with me, but it doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, my responsibility are to the clients. And if I fail in that responsibility, I won't have a business. If I don't have a business, I don't have a YouTube channel, right? Because the YouTube channel is an extension of the business. And that's how it all kind of locks in together. And for the viewers, it's there simply as a means for me to share knowledge with people without having to pay money to go to school And then you get out of school, and the first thing they tell you when you get hired is, forget everything they taught you at school, because this is the way we do it. I'd rather show you in reality the way things really go down. So when you say it's, when you say, for example, that I'm no nonsense, customers don't really tolerate nonsense. If you want to treat your customers with nonsense, you probably aren't going to have very many customers for very long. So there's a rhyme and a reason to all of it. And I think people on YouTube are so afflicted by watching a certain kind of entertainment that when someone actually comes on and shows them actual work, it's hard for them to differentiate the reasoning other than, I have a different attitude. But it's an attitude that's required to run a business that is not required when all you're doing is building for yourself. There's no consequences. There's nobody to tell you you did a crappy job. There's no punishment other than to yourself. And you're not held accountable by another party that could sue you or take everything you've ever earned from you because you cost them too much money. So you can imagine if you're a mechanic and you screwed up royally on an engine in a fire truck or an ambulance, and as a result people died, there's going to be consequences. Now, if you modify your own car, and in doing so you die driving the car you modified because you did something wrong, well, those are your consequences, but they don't really, there's no ongoing, litigation or anything. So anyway, that's what I try and do here, and I appreciate that you're a member here and that you support us here, because I just think every industry should have more representation on YouTube, but instead the enthusiasts have the most in any category, including investing. I mean, there's people offering investment advice that are broke. I'm not taking investment advice from someone who's broke. If Warren Buffett wants to come on here and tell us what, some investment advice, I'll be listening. I'm going to take this filter off, which I think, yeah, that just pulls off of there. We'll stick it with everything else, because I want to give this a thorough cleaning. So just to completely disassemble it. And let's see. We've got CPU power in the top left. I suppose, yeah, let me get the CPU power connector off. Ooh, that is a tight fit. How am I going to do that? Oh, lucky me, this one has two. It has an 8-pin and a 4-pin. I think we need to take the rear fan out. Just give me a little more room in there. Small case. Overcrowded, small case. Yeah, that's our Noctua Chrome Max fan right there. And now I can actually get my hands in here much easier. Oh, what a difference. And, ooh, why are these cables so tight? More zip ties. Really, I tightened those down. I was trying to get them hidden as much as possible. And it looks like, yeah, we used another one right out here. By the way, these aren't designed for the way I use them. I just didn't really feel like I had much choice. Yeah, there's another one. Normally, all of your cable ties are going to be inside of the computer. You're not going to have to do this unless you're doing something wrong or basically try to put too much in, which is exactly what happened here. There's another one. And now these CPU power cables are loose, and I can push a little slack in there now, so I should be able to get my hands in and remove those, I hope. Turn this way. The radiator for the NZXT is a bit in the way, but If the radiator was out, I could easily get at this. The problem if I take the radiator out is I got to take the pump off. Well, that's got to come off anyway, doesn't it? Yeah, maybe that's what I'll do. And that USB cable that plugs into the pump goes right up against the RAM, making that delicate to remove. Wow. Did I do a number on this cable management? It's got so many zip ties and cables folded, I can't really move the pump much without first removing those cable ties. I was trying to keep some of them on so I don't have to redo them, but it doesn't look like I've got much choice here. Let's see. I have a cable tie here. Well, and that's a talent too, cutting through these without cutting through the cables they're wrapped around. It's still kind of heavy. So all of these cables that are coming through here are all going to the pump. So these all have to be unplugged. And one of these is USB, isn't it? Oh, here we go with another cable tie. Leave the cable tie for now. What is going on here? Okay, is that all of them? I'm gonna trying to show you, but it's hard to work with the cameras not behind me. And if the camera was behind me, you'd be looking at my back. So either way, it's kind of a difficult thing to show. Okay, I think that's all of us. Maybe not. Where the heck is that going? I am hung up on something and I don't know what it is. Let me get my flashlight because it's dark in there. See if I can see any better. Oh. Okay, so one of these is a fan power cable for the fan on the radiator. We should have another one right beside it. What is this? Oh, that's the header for the USB that goes into the pump right here. And this cable right here That's our main power cable that feeds into the pump here, and you can see how it's all twisted around. See how many cables come off the pump itself? And that doesn't include the hoses to the radiator and the fan cables on the radiator. And that's what happens when you spend a lot of money on a pump that you didn't have to. You could have spent, you know, these days, for what this cost me, I could buy 4 or 5 coolers that are equivalent in cooling capacity without the stupid screen on the front. I do like the stupid screen. It's definitely not worth the added cost. So what I'm seeing is a cable that's going, it looks like it's going up. Where is it going? Can't tell. Wow, that is seriously messed up. None of these cables going onto this block. Oh, wait a minute, maybe there is a plug. Hold on. I guess all of them together come out like that squid right there. And so on this block, you've got that connector that goes in, and you've got the USB cable that goes in. What a mess. Just to add a liquid cooler. It's just ridiculous. And this cable, for one reason or another, seems to be different than the others. I don't know why this one is going up instead of out the back. I guess I'm going to find out. So the first thing I do when I take these radiators out is I start with the screws in the middle into one corner on the opposite side. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 screws on each side. And I want to leave a screw in the far corner closest to me. Well, the corner closest to me and the far corner closest to you on the other side. That'll keep the radiator from tipping from weight, and then it'll bend the radiator because the screws are very tough screws and the radiator is very soft metal. So what I want to do is take out 6 of the 8 screws, and I will put this in exactly the same way, and you'll see me do that every single time with a radiator. I do one corner with the first screw, right, because I'm holding it, doing it by myself. I don't have any help. So I hold the radiator up, one screw at one corner, and then one screw at the other corner, and then the radiator's held in place. So now when I move forward on this project, I can now use this hand to take out those last 2. Because the minute I release one, the entire weight of the radiator is going to come down on that side the screw is supporting. And without something to hold the radiator up, you will likely bend the crap out of that radiator. And yeah, it's not going to be a good day, especially if you have a $250 or $280. Heck, they make radiators now that are $400. So now we tilt that and very gently start to bring that out. Yeah, that's the one cable I was trying to figure out where that was going. Seems like that was run incorrectly. It should have been run behind. And you can see, if you're not really familiar with computer parts, if you don't keep all of your cables and parts together with each component, it may be very difficult to figure out where that stuff needs to go if you're going to use them again. So something like a little Ziploc bag or something that you could put all your cooler parts in. Coolers traditionally do have a lot of cables. Now, the video power, we can remove that out of here because we're not going to put a GPU back in here. Take that out, and once again, we've got more cable ties. Yeah, we're going to have a ton of cable ties when we're all done here. And since the motherboards don't always align with where the cables plug in most cases it doesn't do you much good to think you're saving any time by leaving cable ties on, because oftentimes they'll leave you the cable too long or too short to where the new motherboard connectors are. They're not always in the same place, so you'll probably end up recable tying it anyway. at least if you care like I do on how it works. Now I should be able, with all that done, to pull some slack. There we go. Now I've got some slack pulled in on those CPU power cables that I couldn't get before. And I get my finger under here where the fans were. And now removing the CPU power connector is light work. And remember, the board we put in here may not require 2 connectors. It may only require 1. So by taking everything out, we're going to start fresh with the rebuild, no differently than if it were being built for the first time. I find sometimes when you're trying to save things like cable ties and rerouting cables, it ends up taking you 3 times longer to have to make the adjustments versus just getting it done the same way you've always done it before. It's sort of like speeding in the car. It might get you there quicker by a minute or 2, but if you get pulled over, it's going to get you there a lot later by about a half an hour or more. So slow and steady is going to win your race almost in every aspect of life, I have found anyway. So that's what it looks like now. I think we can pull the board out. And because I'm keeping the system upright, whoops, better save those screws. I know where they go. Because I keep the board upright, I will do the same thing basically where I'm going to, in a scenario like this, if we take out all the screws, the board's going to fall out. So ideally you lay the case down. But if you're going to work with the case upright, leave the top, one of the top screws, preferably top middle, as your last screw. So that way, you know, the screws down here don't matter. When it comes to the board falling out, it'll happen from the top this way. So that should be the last screw you remove if you're working on a motherboard that's vertical. We all understand gravity, right? So I will take out all the screws along the bottom. Let's go. There's one here in the middle of the board. Now here's the other thing. These screws are likely identical to the ones that came out of the radiator, but they may not be. In fact, they're not. I see these are a fine thread, and the screws I just took out of the radiator are a coarse thread. But they, if you don't pay attention, they look exactly the same, but they're not going to go in or they're not going to tighten if you put them in wrong. So I definitely want to keep those screws away from where I'm working right now, because those I need to put the radiator back in. These I need to put the replacement motherboard back in. So whatever system that you prefer to use, I try to keep everything separated. If I wasn't going to use this radiator for a while, I would take all those parts and put them in a Ziploc because I won't remember. And I'll just grab a Sharpie marker and write cooler components or cooler parts. Or more specifically, NZXT Kraken. And then I will keep the radiator and the pump with that Ziploc bag. And it's never a problem. It's only a problem when I don't do that. And I was planning to get back to a project thinking, oh, I don't need to do this. I'm going to do it in a few days. But then a few days turns into a few weeks, and now I can't remember what went where unless I play back a video like this that I've made and then watch how I took it apart, which I don't like doing. Again, when you have one computer and that's all you work on, you're not going to have the kind of confusion that I have when we have 40, 50 computers laying around here, all in various stages of construction or build, some waiting on parts, some waiting to be sold, and some waiting to be upgraded. This was one obviously waiting to be upgraded, and just waiting for the right time and opportunity to do that, which turned out to be today. But I could not have predicted that if you'd asked me, when are you going to upgrade this? At some point when I have time. When's that? Well, apparently May 25th. See what I'm saying? Like, sometimes we don't know until we get there. All right, I think I've got everything except for one screw on the top. One, two, 3. Yeah, it looks like I've got all of the screws removed except for the one on the top middle. When I take that one out, I want to prepare myself to catch the board, preferably just hold the board and remove it. Normally I would leave a regular air tower cooler on the board and just grab the board by that. It's so much easier. When we deal with a liquid cooler though, I don't have that option. So I've got to find another clever way to hold the board So I'm not touching any of the components. So the VRM heatsink is a safe place right up here. The I/O shield is a safe place. Stay away from the RAM. Stay away from any of the components on the back of the board or on the top of the board, unless it's a heatsink or a piece of plastic that you can grab with your fingers and thumb and hold that. So I think the VRM heatsink's the way I want to go. And I wouldn't ordinarily carry a board around by the VRM or by any heatsink unless it was massive. But just to hold it for a few seconds, just so we can get this board out safely, shouldn't be any problem. But we don't want to hold it that way or hang on to it vertically by that VRM heatsink for an extended period of time. Just what's necessary. Okay, so that's the final screw, and the board is not leaning out yet. So something else is holding it in, which I'm not sure what that is yet. I'm just trying to clear a little space. So I am going to grab it by this VRM and see if it, oh yeah, very good. I got lucky on that one. And that's our board. You can see the 970 Evo Plus has no heatsink on it because that's how we did it. They just didn't get that hot. I've never had a heat problem with the NVMe drive on that. That's the 970 Evo Plus 2 terabyte, which I installed a ton of those. And using heat sinks on those is completely unnecessary. So there's your proof. That's never had a heat sink on it since the day it was built, and it's never once had a heat issue. And I'm moving very large video files constantly when I use this, because I will be recording the streams as I'm live streaming, and then I move those recordings off to another drive outside of the box, and that can get very, very hot in doing those size transfers. But even then, it never got to a point where it was like, hey, it's too hot. The other thing I find interesting is my choice of putting a fan up, leaving the Phanteks fan here, the Noctua fan here, and NZXT fans here. I don't know what I was thinking. I wouldn't do it that way today. I'd pick a manufacturer's fan and stick with it. The only exception would be, like, if the radiator came with good fans regardless, I'd leave those. Like these NZXT fans on the radiator are fine. But if I went with a Noctua in the rear, I should have gone with a Noctua in the front. And I'm guessing the reason I didn't do a second fan is I don't think there was room for it. Once the radiator's in place, you know, if you come around and look at it from this angle, the top of the fan above that, right up here, would only go about that far. So the full height fan would not work. Having a graphics card installed on your motherboard is great to have a fan blowing air over it. And that's why that fan was positioned right there. That's how that decision was made. It wasn't random. That fan was placed into the path of the GPU to help keep the air cool, and this fan was placed to help keep that air moving. Without a GPU, we really don't need that fan, and I would even say we don't need the rear fan, because the radiator is going to be bringing air up and out. Then our airflow then will be moving from bottom to top. Adding the additional fans brings in more dust, it adds more noise, and it adds the power consumption and the heat of the fan motors inside of your case. There are so many heat-obsessed people on the internet, but don't actually have heat problems they're solving. They're having heat problems in their head that they're trying to prevent, that they never would have had, but they never tried. So I think if you have more than one exhaust fan, you have too many fans. And if you've got an intake fan in the front and on the bottom, pick one. Because what you're doing is you're crossing air streams. You're having air coming in one way and air coming in another way. And what happens when you do that with water is you get a whirlpool. So now the water's not moving up or down or back, or it's just going around in circles. And what ends up happening is all the components around are all getting hot because you added those fans. If you had not added those fans, they would be all running cooler and you wouldn't have that whirlpool happening. Unfortunately, the consensus seems to be, let's measure the CFM or the airflow of each fan to see how effective it is and how much air airflow the case has. And there are plenty of review channels that get into this level of detail, of technical detail, that has no impact on consumer grade electronics. If you're building a rocket to go to space, or if the equipment you're building is something you've designed yourself or is experimental, part of research and development of a future product, then what you've got is an unstable product that's not ready for the public. And it may require that kind of cooling, where stuff like that matters. But if you're buying a consumer case, and you're buying a consumer motherboard, and you're buying a consumer cooler, all of those extra fans, that's just consumerism. That's no longer a technical engineering requirement. It has now become a way to get you to part with your money and convince you that by doing this, you won't have heat problems, except that you probably would have never had any heat problems to begin with if you didn't spend the money and put those additional fans on. If you think about all the computers Dell and HP sell every year, millions, by the way, 300 million last year worldwide, are they equipped with a ton of fans? How are they not burdened with dead computers overflowing their warranty department and causing them financial losses every quarter that they report in their earnings statement? That's public knowledge. And if they put all those fans in unnecessarily, how does that affect their public earnings announcements when they had all this extra expense and couldn't necessarily charge more for the computer as a result, unless they're convincing people they need it? But then how much did they spend in marketing to do that? The fan companies and the case companies, they don't need that marketing. They've got YouTube enthusiasts to just take that bait and run with it. And then they give you this information which is technically accurate, but is not practical and does not apply to you because you're a home user and you're not an overclocker or experimenter. If you're trying to break the Guinness Book of World Records for clock speed, and so you've just bought an $800 high-end CPU, and you just bought liquid nitrogen to keep it cool, and in this test you're going to kill that CPU in about 6 minutes, and that's all money down the toilet because you want to chase high clock speeds, the information they provide you to accomplish that is very useful if that's your goal. I've never had a customer approach me ever in my whole life that ever suggested or even hinted at that. It's so bizarre. But this is what gets popular on YouTube, and then people try to replicate that, which you're free to do, but it's all making things more expensive and more complicated. That's ultimately your own punishment in both financial and maintenance, long-term ownership of it. And then good luck convincing somebody that's not an enthusiast, somebody who's not watching YouTube videos, why they should pay more for your computer on, say you're selling it years from now. They're not going to hear it. They're going to say, no, I'm not paying extra for all that because I can buy that, these specs, I can buy the same for $200 less. And you could say, well, it doesn't have all these fans and that. And you say, well, I don't need all those fans clearly because I can buy it here I could save $200 is what I know. And it works fine. So I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm telling you what I do. And where my frustration is, I imagine sort of like a doctor watching a medical show on TV, just shaking your head going, no, that's not how we treat that patient, or that's not how we would diagnose, or the things Dr. House would have done never would fly in a hospital. He'd have his job gone if he did some of that stuff. Most of that stuff is just not the way it works for various insurance purposes, etc., and liability issues. So I think that's where I come across, is that I'm in the industry and I can see the nonsense that people are consuming online. And I'm trying to warn you guys that, well, that may be great entertainment. Most of the knowledge is not practical. It's possible. It's not pragmatic. You can absolutely do that if you want to. You can spend that money and spend that time and deal with the ongoing maintenance nightmare and hiccups. If you choose to, I'm not here to tell you not to. But it's absolutely not pragmatic. It's sort of like protecting yourself against the zombie apocalypse. I mean, go ahead if you think that's coming. I won't stop you. But for the rest of us, yeah, I'm not too worried about it, because It's never happened before. Why would it happen now? And it's that same logic, like, were you having overheating problems before? So why are you so obsessed with heat problems other than the information you're getting from YouTube? Because they don't exist. They're very rare, very, very rare. So what I prefer is I prefer to wait until I have a problem rather than try and prevent a problem. Because if you're preventing a problem, you're not learning anything. You'll never know that you would have had the problem. Therefore, you can't be sure you even prevented it. So you're not really growing as a human being. You're almost going backwards in the sense that you will ritualize something with an idea or a faith or a belief that is not factual, that is not reproducible by others, simply because you've been convinced to believe. And look, if you want to, if that makes you feel good, by all means. But if you want to only do what's necessary, and then if you have an issue, resolve it, there's much more education in that, much more valuable education to what really matters versus what's possible. Because there's a lot of things that are possible, but the odds of them happening to any of us are oftentimes very, very insignificant. So, like, the word is it probable? And this idea that by adding all of these fans that you're avoiding a problem, you may never have ever had that problem to begin with, therefore would have never needed to spend the money or have the anxiety or deal with all the cabling and deal with when the fans go bad. You now have multiple fans that can go bad now, so your chance of a failure is multiplied by the number of fans you have, right? The more complex the system is, the more maintenance and the more that can go wrong with it, and it'll always be things you never saw coming. And that's what life is supposed to be about. We deal with the unknown, and we deal with it at that time. When it comes to having a contingency, such as having backups and things like that, that makes sense that if the unexpected happens, we have a plan. So for example, let's say you're going to build a computer and you're hearing some YouTube tech channels telling you about airflow. You should not care about airflow. In my opinion, airflow doesn't matter. Which case has better airflow? Doesn't matter. Which fan has more? It doesn't matter. The differences between them are what we call tech minutia that only matters to the most extreme overclockers, and that makes up fewer than 1% of 1% of computer owners worldwide. It's insignificant, but the amount of data they put out on the internet is not the same representation of what they represent in population. So it can sort of trick you into thinking this is something that matters or you should care about. And I'm telling you, as a real working technician for 34 years, no. Here's your contingency. You build a computer the same way Dell or HP would build it, in the sense that you're not throwing in all this unnecessary additional stuff unless you're going for a look, right? If you're going for an aesthetic, that's a personal choice. And how do you value art? Somebody's trash is somebody else's sculpture. Okay, so I don't even want to begin that conversation. But when you're talking about a practical machine that you can count on, that you don't have to put a lot of maintenance in, that'll be reliable and perform fast, and it won't cost you a lot of money, then I'm going to show you how to do that, because that's what I do for a living. That's all I've really ever done. Stuff like this was just done for the channel. And once I don't need it for the channel anymore, I don't want it. It's dumb. It is, for me, in my attitude, it is not art. It is like putting hubcaps on a lawnmower. If you want to put hubcaps on your lawnmower and you want to spend money on that, I'm not here to tell you not to. I'm also not here to condone that and suggest it's a good idea, because you obviously have more time and money than I do. I wish I had that kind of problem. If you're putting that on a credit card and going in debt for it, just bad choices. Now, if something happens and you build your computer the way I'm suggesting, and you should end up with a heat-related problem or any issue at all, your backup is to come here and talk to us. We can help diagnose whether or not you've put something together improperly or mismatched any parts, or if another fan would be necessary. Do you know how many times I have recommended a client that has an issue with a computer crashing replace a fan as their solution? I've had fans go out where the customer says, hey, the computer's making noise. I've had CPU fans go out and the customer never even knows. If the CPU fan isn't turning, they never know. Like on the Core i5s, they just don't overheat. The heatsink is enough for regular business use. It just never. I end up finding out when I open the computer to do an upgrade, and I'm like, oh, that fan isn't turning. But usually when a fan starts to die, it makes a noise. Most of the time, if I ever have to replace a fan, 9 times out of 10, it's because it's making noise, not because of heat. The bearings wear out. Customer's annoyed by the sound. I go and I change the fan. CPU fan included. And I don't do that very often. So this obsession with heat and fans is so over the top and ridiculous from my perspective. I wish that was my job. I wish it was that easy. I wish I could simply avoid all problems by putting in another fan. All you're doing is guaranteeing you're spending more money, you're going to have more cable management, and you've got more fans that will fail and eventually cause you a problem, more so than anybody else who didn't unnecessarily do all that time and spend all that money. And if that's what you want to do, and I want to reemphasize this, I'm not telling you not to. I'm also not telling you not to put hubcaps on your lawnmower. Just so we're clear. All right. Bill Stott said, most people that attend a tech school are told that the company hiring you will train you on their equipment or software. Well, yeah, you got to be prepared for that, for sure. David Graham said, I just realized how small that case really is. Yeah, it's pretty small. David Graham says, release the Kraken. We have released. That's exactly what we did. We released the Kraken. Lou Greenia says, I still say that the Trident Z RAM is gorgeous. Oh, for sure. That's still the best looking RAM I've ever seen. I agree with you. And they do make it in DDR5 now, too. Bill Stott said, I agree. My case has a single exhaust fan that is sufficient cooling for CPU and GPU both, and it runs less than 50 degrees Celsius under load. But and here's the thing, Phil. How often do you see YouTube content creators saying that you don't need this? They're constantly pushing more and more extreme and unnecessary, in my opinion, often expensive, and end up with a much more complicated build. And then they can measure, look at, I'm getting this much more now. I've spent this much more in return to get that much more. That you're not even pushing it that hard to begin with. I can get my car to go 200 miles an hour. I won't even drive at 100 miles an hour. So if the car wouldn't go faster than 120, how would I know that it could do 200? It's the theoretical science of the benchmarking, what they go, see there, we got a little more voltage. See there, we got a little more frequency. Oh my gosh. The frequencies are so high now that those little changes are insignificant to the overall total of what we're getting. In the old days, those little changes were a larger percentage of your total. Today, they're a little teeny tiny percentage of power, but a much bigger percentage in cost. It's offset, and you've lost all your value, in my opinion, just throwing money at the wall. But again, I have to be practical, because otherwise customers will say I'm too expensive. And I could sit there and say, yeah, but I put in 10 fans and it requires a lot more work, and there's a lot more parts. There's a lot more cable management. And even if I can convince a customer to spend the extra money that it's worth it to have all of these extra things, then the next complaint is, how come you're always coming out to service it? Well, because you've got all these other things that can go bad. Instead of a simple computer, a normal everyday computer, regardless of performance, has about 7 or 8 components. That's all you need. The minute you go beyond 8, you're taking it, in my opinion, you're going above and beyond what you need. What do you need? You need a power supply. You need a case. You need a motherboard, a CPU, RAM, and storage. You may or may not need a GPU. Couple of fans, let's just say. If the case doesn't come with fans, you'll want like 2 fans, at least 1. That's 8 things. When I tell people I can diagnose most computer problems in under 10 minutes, oh no, I've been working on this problem for 3 days. You can't fix that. I guarantee you I can solve it in under 10 minutes. Because the first thing is you take the drive out, the storage drive, get that out of the equation. You disconnect all the fans, you disconnect all the RGB, you just start with the motherboard, the RAM, and the power supply. Disconnect printers, disconnect the network, disconnect all the nonsense, disconnect the speakers, because that's probably the source of the problem. The reason we're going to focus on the storage drive is we need to identify first and foremost, do we have a software problem or do we have a hardware problem? And so one way we can figure out a software problem real quick is just throw another storage drive in it with Windows and see if the problem still happens. So if the computer's blue screening and now we just stuck another drive in there real quick, see how Windows runs. If Windows continues to blue screen, we have a hardware problem. Therefore, we could take the storage out of the equation. Now what are we left with? RAM, CPU, motherboard, power supply. It's not going to be the case. You're down to 4 parts. How long does it take you to check those 4 parts? RAM is pretty easy. Just take the RAM out, swap in another set of RAM real quick, see if the problem goes away. Problem still exists. Now you're down to power supply, motherboard, or CPU. The motherboard and CPU are sort of tied together. So in all likelihood, if you're down to that level, it probably makes more sense to just go ahead and replace both motherboard and CPU. If you want to take it further, swap out the CPU with another one you've got laying around. If you're a professional shop like me, you're going to have parts laying around. That's why I can diagnose nearly every computer problem in under 10 minutes. And I've demonstrated it live. Now, when we're chasing down weird software problems that only happen sometimes, those are a nightmare. Intermittent problems are very lengthy to solve. Because if I can't do something to make the problem happen, how can I know if I fixed it? So as long as the computer keeps exhibiting the same behavior, 10 minutes, it's real easy. But the minute you start adding a bunch of unnecessary crap, the first diagnostic step is to remove all the unnecessary crap, disconnect all those unnecessary fans, and see if the problem still occurs. If that solves it, we know it's one of those added components that was added voluntarily at additional expense that wasn't needed and added over complexity to the system that is the cause of the problem, and you're in and out in 10 minutes. Finally, you have the power supply. But power supplies, usually when they go out, they just don't work. Unless you have a modular power supply and you have mistakenly used the wrong cables on it. In which case, you're probably going to have to replace the power supply, the motherboard, the storage, the RAM, anything that was plugged in when you put the wrong cables on and juiced it. Then the whole system's probably shot. Now you can reuse the case. And if you're lucky, by testing the CPU, motherboard, storage, and RAM, and they work, you've got away more or less unscathed, except for the power supply. But that's a user-created problem. Most of the diagnostics today in 2025 are user-created problems. I've shown you just the other day where the date was set to 2066, and that is likely why that motherboard was sent back to Amazon. The user did that. I'm not complaining. I'm happy to make the money, whether the part fails on its own or the customer causes it. But when the customer causes it as a result of watching some YouTube content creator, there are no repercussions for that customer to go to that YouTube content creator and hold them responsible for the costs. It's not possible. You did that. They didn't. You made a bad decision. It's going to cost you. I'm going to profit from it. So in my line of work, if I were to do that to a customer, that customer could sue me and hold me liable. That's the main difference, right? So who you want to take your information from? I know who I'd pick. And I know who I still pick today. I don't know everything. So when I'm getting advice from people, why do you think I invite Doug Betts and Scott Merrill and and others on this channel, Mike's Unboxings, because I respect them. They are peers. They are obviously better at some things than I am. I know I'm better at some things than they are. No man is an island. We can help lift each other up and support each other versus, compete over who's better. If you're running a business and your business is staying open, you're obviously doing everything okay, right? If you can't sustain your business, it really doesn't matter what anybody else thinks unless they've got money in it, like they've invested in you. And when you go out of business, they lose their money. It's a very different amount of pressure on somebody to run a business if you have employees, and those employees now will have to go looking for other work and may not be able to feed their families or make their house payment. So for those of us that are comfortable enough that we can sit at home tinkering with our computers for a novelty or for fun, that's great. Enjoy it. For the most part, I enjoy the challenge of building practical, budget-friendly machines that are reliable, that my customers see the value in and they won't go anywhere else. Once you've had a machine built by me, why would you ever want to go back to Dell and HP? Because if you ever have any problems, you're going to talk to the guy who built it. It's in my own best advantage to make sure you don't have to call me. And if you don't have to call me, eventually you're going to realize, I've had this computer for years and I've never had to call Carey. It's starting to need to be replaced. Guess who they're going to call again? Or if they have a conversation with their friends and it's about computers and their friends complaining about how unreliable their computer is. Let me tell you about my computer guy. And that's my marketing. That's my advertising. That would ordinarily cost me money. Customers are doing it willingly for free. That's a pretty good business model from my perspective. So that just shares with you my perspective on the whole difference. And it's not about putting anybody down. It's about giving you some perspective as to when somebody's making a video, why are they doing it? Why do I do this? Why do others do it? And so when I'm talking to Mike's unboxing reviews and how to, Doug Betts, Planet Cryos, the reason I'm drawing attention to them is the reasoning behind why they're making the content. And the reason why I don't go and promote a lot of the bigger YouTube channels is they're all mostly commercials and they don't actually have any customers. Their customers are the motherboard makers. Their customers are the cooler maker. Those are their customers. So effectively, they're a media marketing company. And maybe that doesn't represent 100% of their content, but the content that isn't all marketing, it doesn't go to a paying customer in most cases. Maybe once in a while they might give it away, something like that. Giving away a computer is very different from customer paying you their hard-earned money and what that customer is going to expect from you in return. So I suppose you could say I'm jealous of it, right? To be able to just do whatever you want and have no consequences. Sounds wonderful, but it's often very impractical to the viewers because unless you're in that same situation, what they're doing would apply to you if you were doing what they were doing. So if I was doing those kind of videos, I'd be inviting them on the show to give me more tips on how I can have all these employees in a big warehouse and make deals with these large manufacturers. It's just not an avenue I want to go down. And so it's not insulting to anybody. It's just that's what they want to do. This is what I want to do. And when I find like-minded individuals on YouTube that also follow that same passion and reason behind making their content, like Doug Betts, like Scott Merrill, like Cyber CPU Tech. We're working technicians. We're getting paid by customers to do work. And we're here as instructors with practical knowledge and accountability to the work we do to maintain our businesses so we don't lose our houses. Versus, I'm going to start a marketing company and make commercials. That's fine. It's just not what I want to do. I've got some components that arrived here today. Let me step away for a second because I want to see what did they drop off. Oh. Okay. The other day we had purchased that MSI motherboard that had the wrong date on it. That somebody did that. That was a user-created problem that ended up returning the board to Amazon, but it was missing the M.2 screw and standoff. And I was going to contact MSI, see if they'd just mail it to me. But it's $5 on Amazon to have it delivered overnight. With there's 8 standoffs and screws. 4 are one size and 4 are another size. I only need 1 standoff and 1 screw, but this will give me extras. And this says it's specifically for MSI boards, $5. So whatever I saved by buying that return board is $5 less, but I also have spares now. This is going to solve a unique problem I've got right here behind the bench. I'm running out of plugs. And so sometimes I have to unplug something to plug something else in while we're live. And I saw this little tiny adapter from Anker. And what this is a little surge protector power splitter that fits on 1 plug and doesn't block access to the plug below on the wall, or the plug above, depending on where you want to put it. I've never seen it before. I said, hey, that's perfect for me. What this does is this gives us, plug this into the wall, right? And we still have access, like if this was on the top, this side is flat, so you could still plug it underneath or plug it in this way. Well, in America, usually our grounds are on the bottom. So this would not be ideal for the bottom plug. This would be ideal for the top plug because of the ground. But what it does in return is it gives me now, it takes 1, but it gives back 3. 1, 2, 3. So those big wall warts now won't interfere with each other. And then I have a separate USB charging device that I use for charging the keyboards and things. But this has 2 USB Type A charging ports and a Type C charging port built right onto it. So if this plugs into the wall like this, then this is what faces me. And what I had plugged into the wall can either go up here, over there, or over there. And this thing is like $10, made by Anker. Where's this been all my life? Because quite frankly, I have a surge protector already plugged into the lower plug, and I have a power cable for the standard PC, for the laptop style plug, and for the 2-prong and the 3-prong plug. That takes up 3 plugs. That leaves me with 3, and 1 wall port blocks the other 2. So then what do I do if I have to plug in something else? So that's where this will come in. This gives me the additional 3, and when I want to charge things up after the show, I don't have to use a separate USB charger. I can just use the USB cable. That's going to save me a lot of trouble. And I just stumbled on this completely by mistake. Anker doesn't pay me to make the video. I actually need this. And it's the only place in the building I need it. I just need one of them. And if I'd have known they existed, I would have bought it a long time ago. So I'm glad that arrived today because, it's nothing urgent, but it's something I'd like to just get done because I keep running into that problem on videos when I'm live where I run out of plugs and I've got to unplug something and I have to decide what I can do without during the show. Let's see. Martin Hogg with £4.99 said, Carey and Mara, hello. I'm not a member, but here is something for another Gatorade. Interesting that you can still contribute and leave a message with a super chat. Interesting. Okay. Well, thank you, Martin. Thanks for hanging out, and thank you for supporting the channel. Now, if any of you have any questions, we're just at about the 2-hour mark, and I've more or less got this broken down to the point where I wanted it. What's going to go in here is I'm going to put in a ASRock live mixer. That's a micro ATX live mixer board with an Intel Ultra 7, because I think the Ultra 7 is the best bang for the buck. Then the Kraken cooler will go back in and it'll keep that Ultra 7 cool. And we need to use DDR5 RAM, so this RAM and this CPU and that Gen 3 storage, they'll stay with this board. The storage we'll use in the live mixer, no, I don't even know if it supports Gen 5 or not. If it supports Gen 5 NVMe, then that's what we'll put in it. If it only supports Gen 4 NVMe, then that's what we'll put in it. I'm okay either way, honestly. But for that reason, in case you're wondering, we'll leave the 9900KS, we'll leave the RAM, and we'll leave the Samsung 970 EVO Plus 2 terabyte in there. This does have the latest BIOS installed on it. And then whether or not I choose to put that in another case, what I will probably do is just try and sell the board, RAM, CPU, and SSD all in one fell swoop. And if the guy thinks it's too much money, I'm happy to take the RAM and the SSD out. And he could put his own RAM and SSD in there. So, because I can always use the SSD and I can always use the RAM. But the CPU and the motherboard, yeah, well, they're very, very fast. They were flagship, top of the line 6 years ago. A lot of people may look down on them because of their age when there's nothing really performance-wise that would leave you wanting more for most people. Now, granted, the main turbo speed on this is now what you could find on a turbo speed of a modern i5 without generating as much heat. But if the price is right, you know, for somebody, they'll snatch it right up as a bargain because they know it's a good chip. And, you know, look, if it's not about the price, then just go buy the latest chip. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're talking about, is price. As for these little screws, I'm going to keep this with the MSI motherboard. That's going to be part of part 2 of the Lian 207 digital build, where we got the motherboard prepped. And then I will explain this and provide a link to this for anybody who wants to buy them. And do know they do separate them by manufacturer because they're not all the same. This says it's specifically for MSI, so I want to verify that's in fact true, because sometimes the manufacturers change their motherboard designs year after year, and it's possible that this works for 90% of MSI boards, but not the one we have, especially if what you bought's brand new. I think this is probably going to be okay. There's 2 different sizes. I think the smaller one is the one we need. And that's what I'm hoping. And for $5, I'll risk it because, quite frankly, there's always another board that's going to be missing these in the future. And just because it says it's for MSI doesn't mean it won't work with other manufacturers. Unless you know specifically what size you need, which most people don't, do know they're all different threads and heights. So the way ASUS does it for some boards, and ASRock and GIGABYTE and MSI, some are interchangeable, some are not. So if you do an Amazon search for M.2 standoff ASUS or whatever your board manufacturer is, you'll find little kits like this with the manufacturer's name that they're designed to work for. It's $5. It's not a lot of money, and it's free shipping, and it shows up in one day. And you could return it if it turns out they weren't right. You could still send it back for free and get your $5 back. But I would keep it because I always need spare parts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just set this stuff over here, and that you'll see on Friday's show, and hopefully we'll get that buttoned up. Also on Friday's show, instead of using, just to give you an idea of how technology has advanced, instead of all of this mess, this is messy. Even Lian came out with a version 2 that doesn't have all that. It's still pretty messy though. Now you can get something like this. This makes far more sense to me. I don't mind this one bit. What this is, I got 2 of these. I got one in black, I got one in white. And the idea behind this is instead of this, this plugs into the motherboard right here. See if I can get you a little closer view. These are $10. This is $100. This plugs into the motherboard power connector, say right here. Right? If I can figure out how that plugs in. Where's my glasses? So we'll just, and this is brand new out of the package, I've never used one, but the concept makes perfect sense to me. We're going to plug this onto the motherboard, right? So that seats down where your power cable normally goes. And your power cable is going to go right here from your power supply. And if your case is well designed, and I don't know if this one is or not, that will line up with the grommet. And so, go back to camera 1. What you get instead is this mirror, infinity light and another little light around it. And now there is an additional cable, because that does need to plug into the motherboard ARGB header, and that way you can control the lighting to synchronize with everything else. You're not installing any manufacturer specific software for it. Will that line up in this case? Some cases it will, some cases it won't. This one, it looks like we're just a little bit off, and it may require removing the grommet to make that work. So it's not a universal fit, but pretty darn close. And it's only $10, and it'll still give you a little bit of that RGB without being over the top and without adding a lot of complexity, while also cleaning up what your cabling looks like. Pretty smart design. We'll see if it works in reality the way it's made out to sound, but it sounds like it's right up my alley. And they do make it in white as well. So I'm thinking on the Lian Li case, where I was originally going to put another one of these on, I cringe at just all the cabling it requires, plus all the additional leftover cable, because it's an extension when I don't need an extension. This in white, on a white motherboard in the white case, I think it'll be a lot more subtle. It's a lot less expensive. It's a lot less work to put it in, and it's less likely going to create any problems for us. $10 on Amazon all day long. 90-degree angled power connector for your motherboard. This one's made by a company called Easy DIY Fab. It's called an ATX 24-pin 180-degree adapter. In black and in white, $10, free shipping. $100. You decide. Or don't get either one. Better decision. Because without that, I wouldn't have any fitment issues if I put this board in here and go, oh, rats. The grommet's just a little too far that way. But I think if the grommet were removed, if we took that grommet out of there, right, if I take this out, then I wonder if that'll fit in there better. After all, the grommet's there for routing the cables, but if the cables only route right to the back of the board, they're not really going through a grommet anyway. Or the grommet's not really serving much purpose, is what I'm trying to say. Let's see if that'll work. It's still half covered by the motherboard tray. You might be able to, it's not going to work with this board in this case. Another board in this case, maybe, or this board in a different case, maybe. So the good news is I have a lot of motherboards where if it doesn't, well, I didn't have any intention of putting it on this. I just wanted to test it. But you could always return it back to Amazon if it doesn't fit your particular case. $10, free returns. If you're just looking for that little bit of fun without spending too much or making it too complex, that is a happy compromise, in my opinion. Andy Kane joins us and says hello. Welcome in, Andy. Whoops. Where'd I go? There I am. Margain says it looks like the 90-degree connector you can get for GPUs. Yeah, I think the same company makes those as well. So 90 degree, this one's 180 degree, meaning it's flipping it the other way, but the exact same idea. Dustin Fuller says, great stream as always, Carey and Mara. Thank you, Dustin. So again, if you have any questions for me, any comments, suggestions, this is the time. We are just about at our 2-hour mark. When I do the part 2 of the MSI build in the Lian Li 207 digital case, then perhaps the following Friday, we can come back to this and install the, what is it, a B860M live mixer board with the Intel Ultra 7 265K. And then Gen 4 or Gen 5 NVMe, I'll have to research that. Some DDR5 RAM. We'll keep the power supply. We're going to put the cooler back in. The GPU will go on a shelf because we won't need it. And then we should be able to finally close the panels, and this will look nice and clean, and it won't be the nightmare that it once was. It'll work like it's supposed to with the appropriate amount of parts in it, and it should be even more impressive than it was before in power and performance, with the keyword being should. And then I'm going to revisit this front fan and decide if I want to keep that on or not. It just bugs me there's one fan in the front. Like, I want two for the look of it, you know? But without a GPU there, I probably don't need any at all. And just put this fan back on, the rear fan. Get rid of that one. That's a Phanteks fan anyway. And that'll just leave me with the NZXT fans on the radiator and the Noctua fan that the radiator's sitting on here on the back. Plus the fan NZXT uses in their power supply. And that way the system should be much quieter, and the longevity of those fans should be much better than the Phanteks fan. Hard to say. Phanteks isn't exactly known for their fans. Not that they're bad, but they don't have the reputation of other manufacturers of case fans. So that's what's coming up. Tomorrow we will be live for a members only video, and those videos, like these videos, the public can watch them, they just can't interact. On members only videos, only the members can watch them and interact, of course. And we'll be live as always on Mondays. The fact that it's a holiday changes nothing for me. So hopefully all the members will join us. If you're here now, we'll join us tomorrow at 1 o'clock as we always do on Monday. Nothing changes. And then as far as Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I don't know yet because of the ongoing construction. We've got a little reprieve from that over the holiday weekend, but I expect that to be in full force next week. Hey, you know, it's got to get done. So depending on what that schedule is, will determine what my schedule is. Friday, the Lian Li Digital 207. And maybe we can do the part 2 on this on Sunday, now when I think about it, next week. And then we'll see what happens Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I think I have a mini PC to review. And if so, I'll do that at least one of those 3 days. And depending on what the construction work is being done, if it's quiet enough, I mean, I might make videos all 3 days. We just have to wait and see how that, I don't have any control over how that's going to play out. Margain said the stream is a bit stuttery. I do see we had some drop frames during today's stream, but not much, maybe 1.5%. Hopefully that's cleared up. The Greenie says, I think the stream is getting tired. William Denton said the easy DIY adapters are great for GPUs. There you go. See, I don't use GPUs much, so I wouldn't know. This will be my first experience with the adapters. And again, I'm not using it on this board. I just was test fitting it because I've never used one ever. But I'm liking that design so much better. If you're going to add RGB to your power connector, I'd rather see it done this way than this way. Okay, and thanks again, of course, to Mara for all the work she does in the background. She's our channel administrator. She takes care of our thumbnails, our video descriptions, and links, and talking with potential companies that want to send us things for review. Most of that stuff is all crap, and I'm glad she deals with it instead of me.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, of course, to our friends at SCD Keys. They're offering that 30% off discount code that's not commission-based. So if you guys are interested in saving money on legitimate copies of Microsoft Windows and Microsoft Office, at least buy it with peace of mind. You're buying from a reputable company. They have 6 months of support after the sale included. And if you run into any problems, reach out to us. We did hear from a viewer that had an issue with a Minis Forum order that they had they pre-ordered it directly to Minis Forum because it wasn't available yet on Amazon. They wanted it so badly, they pre-ordered it. Then they decided they didn't want it anymore. They said, that was too impulsive, I want a refund. And then Minis Forum said, we'll give you your refund. And a few days went by and he didn't get it, and he was getting worried. But the way credit cards work, especially with smaller companies, is they have to wait until the credit card company pays them, which is usually a full business week, 5 business days before they get their money. And to avoid being scammed, they wait until they get their money, then they issue the refund. And that's why when you're using a credit card to make payments to smaller companies or for larger priced items, there's a delay. With cheaper items, companies are more likely just going to give you the refund, right? But yes, that's how some scammers work, is they will use a stolen card. Well, I'm trying to think about how this works. They'll claim they'll get a refund from something that was never charged on the card. It ends up being declined for one reason or another. That ends up putting a credit onto that card, which isn't the way it's supposed to work. The way it's supposed to work is when you get that authorization from your credit card that the purchase is authorized, until the merchant gets the money, that sale's not done. Like it should be. But in order to avoid refunding an amount that never came through for one reason or another, it got declined after the approval, which can happen, especially with stolen cards and such. What ends up happening is the manufacturers end up giving you a credit back. They can't void the sale, it's already gone through. So they give you a credit back, and then they end up not getting that money to begin with, and now they've lost out on whatever that amount is. So I was explaining this to the gentleman. I said, look, it's not like Amazon. They don't have those big bucks. They can't afford that kind of a loss. So they're going to wait, and it's pretty standard practice. And as far as I remember, this was always the way credit cards have always worked. Merchants wait to get paid, and it's usually these days once a week or 5 business days. Once they verify those funds have gone through and cleared, then they can issue the refund back to your credit card. And that's why if you use a credit card, which is great, at a smaller retailer online, and you change your mind and you want that refund back, you're going to wait up to 10 business days. If it goes beyond 10 business days, then, if it's something that we do, some product that we've endorsed, reach out to us and let us know. And we'll be happy to advocate on your behalf. A lot of times it's just a miscommunication or somebody made a mistake. It's nothing, in my experience, that's intentional. And the person that reached out about this said, in fact, that's exactly what happened. About 3 days after they reached out saying, it's been a week and I haven't got my money, I haven't got my return. Sure enough, well within that 10-day business period that I've already explained, the money did go through, and Minis Forum did absolutely refund it. And that's why there was a delay. And again, as far as I remember, this is always the way credit cards have worked. If you deal with a large company like Amazon, they might be more risk. They might be more willing to lose $500 or whatever the refund is. But if it's a smaller company, doesn't have all those billions in investors, that's coming right out of their salary, right out of their expenses. Or if it's a cheap item, like a $10 or $20 item, they also will be more likely to give you that immediate refund because it's not that big of a risk. So that explains that for those of you who aren't familiar with the way credit cards have always worked. In my whole life, they've never worked any different than that. But some people have either forgotten, or they're new to credit cards, or they only have dealt with large companies and smaller purchases. I don't know. It's pretty normal. But for those of you that were here watching when we had that discussion about Miniswarm, and I said I'd look into it, I never even had a chance to look into it. I never said a word to anybody before I got around to it. Well, I told the viewer, let's wait the full 10 business days, and if still, then I'll reach out. I didn't have to reach out because within the 10 business days, Miniswarm did exactly what they said they were going to do, which is what I expected to happen. They did, so everything's good. All right, I just wanted to follow that up. Thank you for the super chats also, and the membership renewals, and for everybody who's currently a member. Thank you for being a member of the community and for supporting us here so we can continue to make this kind of content. A welcome again to Dimitri, who just became a member today. Thank you, Dimitri. Welcome aboard. Thanks to Mark Gaines. Thank you to Charles Griffin. Thank you to Ben Laird. Thank you to Ken, or Find Me in Hawaii. Thank you to Nicholas Menard. And thank you to Martin Hogg for supporting the channel. And of course, our friend Buster up there in Scotland. A shout out to him saying hello. Our friend Frankie B, Oystein, Mats Olaf, all around the world, our viewers, like Paul Gray in Australia. We just want to give you all a shout out. Of course, Charlie Purdy, Phil Stodd, Mark Gaines, so many of you that are so generous here. And without your support and generosity, well, it's hard to say where this channel would be today. And it's because of these folks and all of our members and those who support us that enables us to make more videos more often while maintaining our financial independence away from big, faceless, soulless corporations that want to dictate what I can tell you and when I can tell you. I don't want to do that. And you guys make it possible for me to continue with this business practice. Let's just call it that. So thank you so much for hanging out. I will see you all again very, very soon. And until next time, till tomorrow for members. Bye for now.